Conor McGregor?
100 million, but that was against Floyd in a boxing match. Okay.
We offered Francis a deal that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the company.
Fighters on his roster saying we don't get paid enough.
UFC is more entertaining to watch than boxing. The pay that these guys are getting in boxing is unreal.
Over the years, the UFC has built itself into a billion-dollar empire. Pay-per-view records shattered, sold-out arenas across the globe, merchandise flying off the shelves. And at the very center of it all stands Dana White, the loud, brash president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, a man who calls himself the biggest fight promoter in the world. But while Dana White enjoys the spotlight and the massive financial rewards that come with it, fighters inside the octagon have been raising their voices about one issue that refuses to go away: money. Specifically, how little of it actually trickles down to the athletes who risk their lives in the cage. The UFC generated over $1 billion in revenue in recent years, but reports and leaked financials suggest fighters see less than 20% of that pie. Compare that to major leagues like the NFL or NBA.
UFC pays its fighters 15% of the revenue that it makes,
where athletes take home roughly half of the total revenue, and the UFC starts to look like an entirely different world. And fighters have noticed. Take Francis Ngannou, the former heavyweight champion. After knocking out some of the most terrifying men in combat sports history, Ngannou walked away from the UFC, not because of a loss, but because of money and freedom. He publicly stated that he wanted fighter pay to improve and asked for health insurance for athletes. Dana White brushed him off, calling him difficult and delusional. But fans saw through the spin. Ngannou's exit was a statement. A heavyweight champion walking away because the biggest promotion in the world couldn't or wouldn't pay him what he was worth. Then there's Jon Jones, arguably the greatest fighter of all time. For years, Jones battled with the UFC over pay, at one point refusing to move up to heavyweight until the money was right. His words were sharp. If I'm going to put my life on the line against guys like Francis Ngannou, I need to be paid like it. Jones sat out for nearly 3 years, holding out for a contract that matched his value. And who can forget Nate Diaz, a cult hero, one of the UFC's biggest draws, yet constantly fighting for respect at the negotiating table. Diaz once said, "They're making billions, we're out here bleeding for crumbs." The Diaz brothers have always had a knack for cutting through the noise, and in this case, their words echoed the feelings of many fighters on the roster. Even rising stars have spoken up. Sean O'Malley, now champion, openly admitted that early in his career, he fought for chump change, relying more on sponsors and outside income than his UFC paychecks. He leveraged his social media stardom to make ends meet, a luxury not every fighter has. So where does all the money go? That's the question that sparks controversy every time UFC financials are discussed. The company was sold to Endeavor for over $4 billion in 2016. Since then, executives and owners have made fortunes, while many undercard fighters still earn as little as $12,000 to show and $12,000 to win.
Payment is $12,500 for a fight. So even if they got...
After paying coaches, training camps, and taxes, some fighters barely break even after stepping into a cage where one punch can change their lives forever. Dana White often counters by saying UFC fighters are the best paid in combat sports, pointing to boxing's uneven structure, where only the top few names earn massive purses, while undercard boxers often make next to nothing. But critics argue this is deflection, because while it's true that not every boxer gets paid millions, UFC fighters are locked into contracts that give them far less leverage to negotiate their worth. And then there's the public image problem. Dana White is often seen flaunting his personal wealth, expensive cars, casinos, lavish vacations. Just recently, he announced a $500 million deal for UFC's new streaming rights, celebrating yet another financial win for the promotion. But when fighters ask for a bigger cut, Dana White's response is often dismissive, even mocking. This is where the controversy burns brightest. How can a company worth billions, run by executives who live like kings, justify paying the very people who built that empire so little? The UFC loves to market its fighters as modern-day gladiators, warriors, killers, legends. Yet once the cameras shut off, many of those same warriors are left scrambling to pay bills, working second jobs, or begging for bonuses. And fans are starting to question it too. Social media has become a battlefield where every leaked contract, every fighter complaint spreads like wildfire. Memes circulate of Dana White laughing in luxury while fighters sit bruised and broken, counting pennies. The UFC may be at the top of the combat sports world, but this issue won't disappear. As more fighters like Ngannou, Jones, and Diaz speak out, and as rival promotions like PFL and ONE dangle bigger paydays, pressure will continue to mount. At some point, the UFC will have to reckon with the truth. Without fighters, there is no show. Without fair pay, there is no future. And the question that hangs over Dana White and the UFC today is simple. How long can you keep building an empire on the backs of fighters who feel underpaid and undervalued? Because history has shown, from boxing to football to every major sport, when the athletes rise up, change becomes inevitable. The UFC may be the biggest stage in combat sports, but if fighter pay remains its darkest secret, the empire Dana White built could face its biggest fight yet.